So when it comes to synthwave drums, there's really two styles of drums. There's a more retro style that uses like samples that are based on like the Lin drum or old 80s drum machines. But that is not the only way to create synthwave drums, because there's a lot of synthwave music today, especially with synthwave really just merging into all other types of mainstream music. Is you have a lot more, you're finding a lot more like modern, clean, more EDM style drums in synthwave projects. Think of bands like The Midnight. They don't use so much of the retro sounding drums. They might use some more retro production mixing on it, but the samples themselves, they're not usually using those more retro sounding drum machines. So you can kind of use both. And so for this, for this drum kit here, I am using a more retro feel. I'm using my Synthwave sample pack. And so that's how I'm going about doing this. I think not all of these are my samples. Some of these are from the Lin drum kit here in Logic, but definitely the kick and the snares and the hats and the toms. And I think the ride and the crash as well. So those are what I'm using mainly here. And so we'll just take a listen to this first. So here are what the drums sound like in the verses. And that reminds me, I also have some other sounds down here. I didn't mean to have that muted. I'm using the congas basically from Beatmaker Vice by UJam. This is one of my favorite tools for creating synthwave music. I've reviewed this on the channel as well. I'll have that linked below. By the way, tons and tons of links in the description below. Many of these will be affiliate links, by the way. So if you do purchase through one of these links, I'll earn a small commission at no extra cost to you. You can consider that like a tip or something, because it really helps the channel. Plus you get awesome plugins. And also you can get discounts on many of these. For example, all UJam products, if you use my code OAA at checkout, you get 20% off. So you can save yourself some money too if you end up purchasing those. And so I'm using the congas, and I'm also using the ride, I think. No, I'm using the tambourine. Yeah, I'm using the tambourine from this right here. So that is that. And I have a filter here on the beginning for the intro, so that the kind of the ARP that kind of can stand out in the intro. And so to do that, you can do anything. You can use an EQ. I'm just using one knob filter by Waves and automating the filter open. You can see that here. And now one thing I'm also doing is I'm using an EQ here to also high pass it. So I'm high passing and low passing. So I'm just using this. It's just one band, so it's simple. You can use any kind of tool to do this. And so I'm cutting the bottom as well as the top, because I found if you don't do that, it can be just a little too muddy, a little too boomy. Right, especially if you got like compression on your drums and everything. It's only working with those low frequencies when you've cut the top, and so it's going to be boosting those, and it's just going to be a muddy mess. So I'm kind of cutting the very bottom here, and so you can think of it. So both the top and the bottom are cut, and then those are opening up as it goes over time. And I got that little snare fill there, which is really nice. Kind of hear the drums, introducing the drums. And then then we have a pre-chorus where the drums drop out. And then I've got a little drum fill here. So you can see what this looks like here. And yes, I am just that good of a drum programmer. I just program this all in to make it sound amazing. No, actually I used, I'm pretty sure Beatmaker Vice for this pattern. And so that's, again, I would really love this plugin. It's kind of like cheating, I guess. Another way of thinking about it is it's like having a drummer, right? As home studio producers, we're doing everything ourselves. It's hard to be a master at everything. That's kind of the advantage of having a band. I recently watched, for the first time, maybe I'm late to the party, the Bohemian Rhapsody biopic about Queen. And I'm not really a fan of Queen, but it was fascinating. And of course, they have a lot of hit songs and they're really famous. But to me, what stood out was actually how much the other band members contributed to the songs. You kind of think of just the front man, Freddie Mercury, as Queen, but actually a lot of the songs are written by the other band members and they had a lot of input. And so, right, this is kind of like having a drummer with you. You have a band member now, and this is a drummer that knows synthwave. And so this has like fills. Awesome fill. And so you get 3 fills per preset here. And look at all these presets. So each one of these has 3 different fills. You get so many different fills. But you don't have to use the samples that come inside a Beatmaker Vice. That's what I'm not doing here. I'm using presets from my sample pack. So I just dragged in the pattern and then I have it playing with these instruments. So really awesome. Again, you can program this yourself. You don't have to use a plugin, but I've just found this really helpful. And right, you can use it with any other sounds that you want in this example currently. So, and then we got the chorus here, which is a pretty straightforward synthwave drum pattern with 4 on the floor kick and then the snare hitting on the 2 and the 4. And so that's right here. And I'm using 2 different snare samples here to get a really big snare sound. And then we just have the hi-hats filling in there. And we also got a bunch of tom hits filling in as well. So that's kind of abnormal. You don't have to have that many tom sounds in there, but I like the sound of synthwave toms, so I put them in. We got a little interlude here and then a fill leading into the second verse. Again, made with Beatmaker Vice. Back into the verse, which is the same, except I'm adding the tambourine all the way through. Before, in the first verse, I was just adding it at in the last bar of each measure. Here I'm adding it all the way through. So I'm always trying to find something to make each section a little different than the previous one, so it's not exactly copy and paste. And it adds a little bit more interest, makes the song more re-listenable. It's the same thing here with the pre-chorus too. I added in some drums here that I didn't have in the first one. And so now let's look at kind of mixing here. We got quite a lot going on. So let me just loop this. So for the kick, I've got some super VHS on here to add some saturation. We'll turn these all off and we'll hear these all on. I'm not going to go too in depth because that will take a really long time. If you want to see my in-depth tutorials on how to make a synthwave kick, snare, tom fill, and so on, I'll have all those videos linked in the description below. But I'll kind of just give you a quick view of how this sounds, adding each of these in one at a time. So here's super VHS. Go ahead and solo the kick. So now I'm adding in some EQ, some more harmonic enhancement, just kind of adding some air mostly to the top of it, so it kind of helps cut through the mix. I'm adding some tape saturation here using IK's Tape Machine 440. So we'll listen to that without it in, then with it in. So it kind of warms it up, adds a little bit of grittiness, and I'm adding some EQ again, some vintage EQ here. Just adding some high end and trying to reduce some harshness. So on my first snare sample here, it's kind of at the top of the snare. It's kind of got some sizzle on it. And we're using this vintage EQ here. Again, kind of doing the same settings as I had with the kick. Removing some harshness, but also adding back some high in there. And then we got a bit crusher on here. Just doing a little bit of down sampling, and I only have it about 60% wet. So it actually makes it a little bit fatter and just a little more, adds a little more sizzle to it. And then lastly, I have the envelope here, kind of trying to, I think I'm trying to reduce some of the sustain there, some of the tail. So it doesn't quite ring out as much, it's a little tighter. And with the second snare here, I'm just adding some EQ. I'm kind of just taking out a lot here because we only want this for like the body. And so then together. And then we got a bunch of reverb on it here with the snare bus. So I've got a couple different reverbs actually. I've got this plate reverb here. I'm using IK Multimedia's Classic Studio Reverb series, their plate. So any kind of plate reverb is good, so you don't have to use a paid plugin. You can use whatever comes with your DAW. So I've also talked about adding gated reverb. That's kind of the typical snare sound for 80s synthwave style music. I've done a tutorial for that. I'll link that in the description below. I'm not really using that here though. I'm kind of more just using a shorter reverb. So it kind of sounds gated without being actually gated. I'm actually using the gated toms preset here and just reducing the reverb time. And I think the actual snare sample has some like reverb on it, so it already sounds kind of reverby by itself. Hi-hats, I'm not really doing anything, actually I'm not doing anything with the hi-hats. So they're just slightly panned left and right a little bit here, the closed versus the open, just spread things out a little bit. And then my tom bus here, this is where I've got some channel EQ, kind of trying to bring out different portions here. So you can hear a little bit of that delay ringing out. And I've got some of my Shep's Parallel Particles here by Waves to add basically a lot of everything to a lot of harmonic enhancement. So without these in, here's what the toms sound like. So it kind of just brings them more forward a bit. And then from there, that is it for the chorus. And then otherwise, during my verses, I've got just some congas here, panned left and right. Those congas sound exactly like the congas from the soundtrack of Civilization 3. One of my favorite games of all time. Sadly, I don't have a PC to play it, but that brings a lot of nostalgia to me, even though it's not 80s. So, but I wanted to put that in there. So, and then lastly, just have some tambourine. And these are just EQ'd. So the conga EQ is pretty extreme here. I'm really trying to bring it forward. And then reverb, just have some more gated tom type plate reverb. So that's it for the retro style drums, and I was pretty happy with these, but then last second I decided I wanted to use a more modern style of drum. So keeping everything the same, I ended up bringing in some drums from Beatmaker Candy, which is the same by UJam, the same company that made Beatmaker Vice. And this is billed as being a basically drum kit plugin for pop music. But I'm using it in Synthwave because it works for Synthwave because they've got this nostalgia kit in here, which is basically a cleaned up pop version of like the Linn drum 80s sounds. And so I really like this because you don't have to do any mixing to this. You can see I'm using it on one track. Now I probably should like split this out into separate tracks so I can individually process everything, but sometimes less is more, a lot of times actually, and I don't want to like over process things. And this sounds pretty good as is, so we can hear what this sounds like. And then I've got some, that compression's not moving, a little extreme. I'm gonna back that off because it's kind of pumping, which is kind of desirable depending on how you look at it for drums. And so I've just got a little bit of saturation here, a little bit of compression. So it's kind of an all-in-one channel strip setting and some tube saturation, pulling back the harshness a little bit, bringing up the mids, bringing down the bass a little bit. So very subtle here. And We've also got the British channel on here. This is also doing some compression and some gating and some EQ. And I've got a full review of this plugin. This is an awesome plugin I like for drums. I'll have this linked in the description. You can hear it's really beefing up the drums, bringing them more forward. And otherwise, that's pretty much all I did. I just same pattern and everything, and I just really like the sound of the samples here. I wanted a more kind of clean, modern feel. So we got that sound versus the retro. Of course, only my congas are on. Of course, I have no congas here, so I don't know if I'll bring those back in or not, but that's what we got here for now. And then I had a different pattern here for the bridge. Just bringing in a pattern from Beatmaker Candy. Just right, you got all these different drum loops and patterns here. I just dragged one of those in. I did a full review of this plugin as well. Again, linked in the description. Again, I was automating the sweep here so it starts dark and then comes up higher. All right, one last thing I did for the drums is I did add in some pitch automation right here between the second pre-chorus and the chorus to just kind of increase the energy here on this section. So with my retro drums here, I also have some drum bus plugins. I threw some smack attack on here to just reduce the attack slightly and increase the sustain a bit. So I probably could have done this with the free enveloper tool here in Logic. Maybe you have a similar plugin, but I just decided to use this one. And so if we turn this off, then I added some tape saturation using IK Multimedia's Tape Machine 80 just to add some more glue to all the samples here, all the drums here. Looks like I'm also adding some EQ here inside of here. And then I've got some multi-band compression, just kind of trying to tame some of the harshness here. Don't hear it so much during the chorus, but maybe more so during the verses. Then some EQ here, just the highs, and then again reducing some of the harshness around 3.8K. I've got some bus compression using basically an SSL style bus compressor. Just helps glue everything together. And then I've got some parallel compression as well using the iHeart NY plugin. If you want to see my complete guide to parallel compression, this is really awesome for drums and a lot of other tracks. I have a full guide to that linked in the description below. If you found this video helpful, be sure to blow up that like button like you're Luke Skywalker attacking the Death Star. And if you want more help creating synthwave music, be sure to click the video playing on the screen right now, as this includes my full in-depth tutorial on creating a synthwave song from start to finish. With that, have an awesome day and keep creating.